Imagine a man who studies police rules, slips through a window, and stands over your bed with a knife. He ties your wrists with shoelaces, stacks plates on your partner's back, and says, "If they rattle, I kill." He assaults you in your own home, then eats from your fridge like he owns the place. Weeks later, the phone rings. "Remember me?" He thinks time hides him. He thinks age will save him. He's wrong. Suburbs promise safety. In the 1970s, Sacramento's new neighborhoods looked like the American dream. Single-story houses, neat yards, a bright kitchen light at dawn. People wave. Children ride bikes in circles. Garden hoses make slow arcs across soft grass. But safety can also be a routine, and a routine can be studied. Someone watched these streets, learned the rhythm, and then used it against the people who lived here. At first, the name was simple: the East Area Rapist. He came through sliding doors or small windows left ajar for a breeze. He tied people with shoelaces. He placed dishes on the back of a man and said, "If I hear these plates rattle, she dies." He moved slowly, like he had all the time in the world. He ate food from the pantry. He drank beer. Sometimes he cooked. And when he left, the silence he left behind was not peace. It was a ringing sound, like a phone you can't make stop. Victims remember small details. A beam of light in the hallway. A ski mask that made the face look oval and empty. A knife that was always exactly where it needed to be. The sound of breath through fabric. The way the attacker seemed to know the house better than the owners. He had studied. He had done walks through these streets. He had looked over fences and measured escape routes in his head. He had listened to police scanners. He had figured out how long it took for a call to become a response. He knew where to leave a car and where he could sprint to that car without being seen. Over time, fear became routine too. People put bars on windows. Hardware stores ran out of locks. Gun shops emptied their shelves. Women learned a new language. Which streets to avoid, which curtains to keep closed, which creak in the floor means you are not alone. Neighbors became suspects to each other. Everyone had a theory. Everyone had a story of a dog that barked at nothing. Everyone slept less. One morning in 1976, a woman named Jane wakes as her husband leaves for work. Her young child climbs into the bed to snuggle. There is a light, a shape in the doorway, a man with a mask and a knife. He ties them. He gags them. He talks in a half whisper, like a person finishing a sentence in a library. He moves through the house, checks the rooms, stays for over an hour. After the assault, he cooks. The smell of food becomes part of the memory. When he leaves, the kitchen looks neat again. But nothing is neat. Not in Jane's mind. Not in her child's life. Not on these streets. Another time, a 13-year-old girl, Margaret, faces him and makes a choice: to live. She feels fear, but holds a harder thing inside it. A voice that says, "You will survive." She studies him, tries to learn the person under the mask. She notices how he uses fear like a tool. She learns that he wants power, silence, control. She decides not to give him the last one. Years later, she will speak. Her voice will help pull the mask up, even if a name is still far away. The attacks multiply, and a pattern appears to the people who can bear to look at patterns. Single-story houses, corners where fences connect at easy angles, parks with paths that cut behind yards and end in empty lots. The attacker moves like water in a shallow ditch, finding the low path. He often targets couples. He uses the dish trick to freeze a man while he terrorizes a woman. He whispers a lie into the dark that feels like the truth. If you move, she dies. He leaves, and the lie keeps working. The house stays quiet. and he moves to another house, in another week, in another neighborhood. Police work hard. They build maps with pins that show clusters. They give the press warnings. They tell people to lock doors, to buy motion lights, to join neighborhood watch. They drive more, but they are also dealing with something new. He studies them too. He seems to know patrol routes. He parks his car far away and darts between backyards. He uses canals and empty fields to move. He makes a call here, stares at a window there, tests a sliding door somewhere else. He is patient, and patience, when used as a weapon, is powerful. Sometime in this period, he is also something else during the day, a police officer in small California towns. He wears a uniform and learns the rules of response. He learns what is written down and what is not. He knows how report writing sounds and what evidence looks like before it is bagged. He knows what can be seen on a patrol drive and what can't be. That knowledge sits like a toolbox inside him. At some point, he is fired for shoplifting, a hammer and a can of dog repellent, a small scandal with a large shadow. People will later say, how did no one follow that thread? How did that not make anyone stop and ask harder questions? By the late 1970s, the attacks in Sacramento taper off. For a moment, the community breathes, but the man does not stop. He moves south to new counties, and the violence grows. A new name sticks to him like burrs on a pant leg. The original Night Stalker. Murders appear, couples in their beds, homes turned into cages. The patterns are similar, but the outcomes are worse. Now the night does not just take control, it takes life. News headlines are colder. Police briefings are grimmer. A map of the state looks like a storm cloud with flashes in it. And then, silence. After 1986, nothing more is linked to him. Maybe he aged, maybe he moved, maybe he stopped, maybe he changed. The years start to stack. New detectives inherit old boxes of files. They read the same notes, stand in the same empty rooms, feel the same frustration. The night moves on. California grows. People change jobs. Kids turn into adults and leave home. The houses get new roofs and new paint. But the past stays, locked behind a door that seems to have no key. In the 1990s and 2000s, DNA becomes a lockpick for time. Crime labs extract profiles from old evidence. They compare the DNA left at scenes to the national database of offenders. Again and again, no match. The profile sits in a computer like a face with no name. Detectives feel both hope and defeat. The science is strong. The results are empty. What else can be done? One detective will not stop asking that question. His name is Paul. He studies how DNA can do more than match a known criminal. It can find relatives. It can make a map inside blood. He learns about public genealogy websites where people upload DNA to find family connections, cousins and grandparents they have never met. He asks a bold question. What if, instead of waiting for the killer's DNA to match someone in a criminal database, we look for a match to a distant cousin in a public one? What if we step into a family tree and trace the branches backward? This idea is simple to explain, hard to do. You take the killer's DNA profile, built from crime scene samples, and you upload a version that can be compared to consumer DNA data. If the database allows law enforcement use, you see which people share small pieces of DNA with the unknown profile. Those people are not the killer. They are relatives, maybe third cousins, maybe fourth. But they are clues. You build family trees for those matches. You look for places where these trees cross, where two branches might have shared a great-great-great-grandparent. You move forward in time down the tree, finding all the living males who fit the right age and location. You make a short list, then you wait, and you watch. One name on the short list stands out. A man who lived in Sacramento during the first wave of attacks. A man the right age. A man who once worked in law enforcement. He lives now in a quiet neighborhood. He has a garage. He has a motorcycle. He seems ordinary in the way that makes the hair on your neck rise. The team watches his house. They learn his routine. They wait for their chance. One day, he throws something away. It is a used tissue, or something similar, the kind of everyday item most people never think about. The item is collected. In a lab, a scientist compares the DNA on that tissue to the old crime scene profile that has haunted detectives for decades. The match is clean. The door that seemed locked forever opens with a simple click. The name that floods the room is this: Joseph James DeAngelo. When the arrest comes, it is quiet. Police surround a small home in Citrus Heights, a suburb not unlike the places where the crimes began. A man in his 70s sits inside. He was called Crazy Joe by some neighbors because he complained a lot. He liked to be left alone. He's taken into custody. He does not look like a monster. Monsters almost never do. He looks like a man who has walked dogs, fixed things, bought groceries, and aged. But when you put his face next to the old maps of fear, something terrible comes into focus. The courtroom is a different kind of stage. Victims speak. Jane expresses what it means to spend decades rebuilding a life that a stranger broke in a single morning. Margaret looks at the man and keeps her own promise to herself, to live, to speak, to take back her voice. Detectives talk about patience and science and teamwork. Journalists talk about privacy and the future of police work. Lawyers talk about time limits. Many of the rapes cannot be charged because the law back then put a clock on that kind of crime. But murder does not run out of time in the same way. And there are murders. In 2020, after a long legal process and a public plea, Joseph James DeAngelo is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is not the young, fast figure from the 1970s. He is thin, he's pale. He sits, he stares. Some people see a fragile old man. Others see a wall of names behind him. The people he hurt, the homes he invaded, the voices he tried to erase. The sentence cannot return what was taken. Nothing can. But the night no longer belongs to him. It is tempting to call this story a victory for science alone. The genealogy search was a door, yes, but people carried the key across decades. Detectives who refused to give up. Lab workers who protected evidence when budgets were tight and shelves were full. Journalists who kept the public aware. Families who held each other together. Survivors who told their stories clearly, without shame, and kept telling them for years. Courage held the line until science could march through. There are also questions this case raises, and they matter. How should police use public DNA data? Who gets to look at that data, and under what rules? How do we protect privacy, while also giving families answers? Different places will make different choices, but the lesson of this case is not just about tools. It is about time. Time can be a shield for bad men. Time can also be a road for good work to travel. In this story, time served both sides for a while. Then it chose. Let's return to the small details, because that is where truth often lives. The plates on a husband's back. The low fences that made it easy to move through yards without using a street. The late-night phone calls where the attacker would breathe and say a word or two, keeping fear alive like a candle that never goes out. The way he ate after an attack, turning someone's kitchen into his dining room. These details are not told to shock. They are told so we can see how control can be built from ordinary things. We lock doors now, not just with keys, but with awareness. We also need to name the pattern for what it was. Domestic spaces turned against the people who trusted them. The worst wounds were made in living rooms and bedrooms. That is part of why the fear was so deep. It invaded the place that is supposed to be the safest. The man used habit as a weapon. He counted on you to go to bed at the same time each night, to leave the window open a little bit in summer, to answer the phone late because it might be a friend. He counted on that. He counted on the police to drive the same loops in the city to keep its parks open and dark. He counted on everyone else being predictable. He was right for a long time. Then the detectives changed the routine. They used a new path. They met him in the one place he thought was private, his own biology. There is one more image worth holding. It is a lab at night. A technician looks at data on a screen, lines and letters, a code that means nothing to most of us. The technician checks and rechecks. The match is not a maybe. It is exact. A crime scene from the 1970s and a tissue from a garbage bin in the 2010s speak the same language. Across 40 years, the past and present shake hands. Outside, the city noises are the same as always. A distant siren, a dog bark, a late train. Inside, someone says, "We have him." And an entire map of fear begins to change shape. What do we do with a story like this? We listen to the survivors. We let them define the ending. We learn about how fear works and how it can be diffused. We support careful, ethical use of tools that can close the distance between harm and answer. We remember that ordinary is a costume anyone can wear. And we remind ourselves that one brave voice can make a crack in what looks like a wall. The Golden State Killer was not a creature of myth. He was a man who used planning, patience, and cruelty. He did terrible harm. He hid in plain sight. But his story is not just about what he did. It is about what other people did after. Detectives who mapped yards by moonlight, lab techs who guarded evidence for years, neighbors who wrote down license plates, families who stood together, and survivors who carried the truth across time like a torch. In the end, that is what breaks the night. Many lights, not one. So picture the plate again. It is not on anyone's back anymore. It rests in a cabinet, stacked with others, quiet. In another room, a phone sits on a table. It can ring. It will. Phones always do. But the ring no longer belongs to him. It belongs to the people who answer and say, with steady breath, "My name is," and then tell their own story, in their own words, on their own terms. This case will be studied for many reasons. How to build patterns from old files, how to keep evidence safe for a long time, how to use new tools with care. But what it gives most of all is a shape for hope. Not a fast hope, not a movie hope, a stubborn hope. The kind that checks a door lock twice and then makes tea. The kind that lets a child sleep. The kind that says, "This is our home." The kind that looks at a fence and sees not a barrier, but a line of defense. At the end of the day, the man who made Night his partner sits in a cell. The years he took from others cannot be returned. The lives he ended cannot be restarted. But his last years are no longer his to shape. He does not choose the routine anymore. He does not choose the route. He does not make the rules. And that is not justice in full. It is not enough. But it is something solid in a world where so much was taken. Remember the name if you like. Remember the faces more. Remember the lesson most. Evil often looks ordinary. Courage always looks human. And time, with help, can become an ally. If this story kept you listening, please tap like and subscribe. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. And if you want more calm, detailed cases you can fall asleep to, check the True Crime for Sleep playlist. There's a link in the description and on the end screen. Thanks for being here.